Hello, I'm going to do video notes today on characteristics of life. And I'm doing video notes so that if I am going too fast, you can pause the video and catch up and write down whatever it is that you need to write down. You should be following along in your on your guided notes that are also located on this page in your class notebook. So characteristics of life. So living things must meet all of these characteristics to be considered living. And we are going to do 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So each letter in this acronym stands for an initial for a qualifying characteristic of life. So in order for something to be considered living, it has to have all 7 of these things. H-O-G-R-E-C-R. And we're going to go through those. Now, an easy way to remember this is Hogrecr. That's why I have this really weird photo right here. Hogrecr. There was, I don't think any pigs were harmed in this, or any hogs, but there was a truck that was carrying a bunch of pigs, and seems that it got in a wreck. And so all these hogs got out. So Hogrecr. Again, each letter stands for something that an organism has to have in order for it to be considered living. So these are all of the things. H is for homeostasis. O, organization. G, growth and development. R, reproduction. E, energy. C, cells. R, response to stimulus. We're going to go through each one individually. So the first one was H, homeostasis. Homeostasis. This means it's a steady internal condition that's maintained by living things. If you look at this picture right here, this shows a human kind of balancing on a seesaw. This is a great image for what homeostasis means. It means that you are balanced on the inside. And some examples of that would be body temperature. If you get too hot, what do? You start to sweat so that your body can cool down. If you get too cold, you start to shiver so you can make energy and start to heat up again. So let me write those out. So sweating and shivering are examples of homeostasis. Water content, if you need water, then you feel thirsty. Okay? If you've had too much water, what happens? Then you have to pee. You got to get rid of it. Okay? So there's lots of examples. It's a way for your body to handle to become balanced. Okay, our next. So that was H, homeostasis, and now we have O, organization. Living things have levels of organization. So usually we follow this order. Atoms, a lot of atoms organize into molecules. Molecules form into cells. And we'll get to the C later in Hogrecr, and you have to have a cell, at least one cell, to be considered living. A lot of cells come together to form tissues. A lot of tissues come together to form organs. Organs form together to form organ systems. And then eventually you have an organism. Okay, so all organisms, everything that's living, a plant, a fly, a little bug, a human, we all have to have levels of organization to be considered living, and you have to have cells as well. Some organisms are only one cell big, so they have no tissue or organs or systems. But like I said, that's okay. Even if you stop here, you're still considered a living organism. So this shows those levels of organization. Again, you have to have at least one cell. So even just one cell in your body, if it's a muscle cell or a nerve cell, all of the cells in your body look a little different because they have different functions. So even just one muscle cell in your body is a living thing. A lot of muscle cells form tissues. So a lot of muscle cells will form your muscles, which will then, if you add a bunch of tissues together, you might get an organ. So on the outside of your organ, or of an organ like a kidney. So on the outside of your organ, of your kidney, you would have smooth muscle cells, and then on the inside you'd have nerve cells. You'd have different types of cells, epithelial, connectivity. You don't need to know all of these different types of cells. What you need to know is that living things have organization. Okay? Levels of organization. That's what you need to know. So G, we've done H, homeostasis, O, organization, and now G for growth and development. All living things, if you're considered a living thing, that means you need to grow and develop. You need to mature. My daughter is, bigger, and she's growing every day. She goes through developmental loops every single day. And last month she looked different than she does this month. Last month, you guys probably looked a little different than you did this month. Last year, you definitely looked different in 8th grade versus 9th grade. So you guys are all growing and developing. Cells grow by adding more molecules to their mass. Multicellular organisms increase in size by adding new cells. So you guys are adding new cells every single day. Cells are limited in size by surface to volume ratio. And when you mature over time, it's referred to as development. Don't worry about this surface to volume ratio too much. We will study that more later. But what you do need to know is that all organisms go through growth and development, and maturing is called development over time. Okay, so you go through maturity levels by developing over time. All right, reproduction. In order for something to be considered living, it has to reproduce. So there's 2 ways you can do that. Actually, there's 3 ways. The first is binary fission, and bacteria do this. Easy way to remember that is B for bacteria, B for binary fission. They reproduce this way. Bacteria are considered living things. They're usually just one cell, but they can reproduce. They go through they have Hogrecr. They use all of those characteristics, and they're considered living. Humans and pretty much all other living things can do both of these, can do mitosis and meiosis. And we're going to spend a whole like 2 months on just mitosis and meiosis and towards the fall. So mitosis is when cells basically make exact copies, or they clone themselves. Your skin cells do this. Meiosis results in reproductive cells with half the DNA. So this is going to be organisms that do sexual reproduction. They reproduce through meiosis. This is how sperm and egg cells are made. Okay, so yes, we're going to talk about sexual reproduction in this class. And it's not just for health, it's for biology too, and it's actually really, really cool. It's meiosis, when we get to more detail of that, it's basically the reason why if you have a brother or sister, you don't look exactly like them, unless you're an identical twin, but that's a different story. It's why all humans look so different from one another. So meiosis is really cool. Or cats and dogs, any organism that reproduces sexually reproduces through meiosis, and meiosis is how they make sperm and eggs. So all living things need to reproduce. They can do it 3 ways. If you're bacteria, you do binary fission. And then most organisms do, if you're not bacteria, you do mitosis and meiosis. All right, so this just shows different ways that organisms can reproduce or divide, your cell division. So remember, fission is for bacteria. Meiosis is for sperm cells, is how we make sperm cells or egg cells, and this is sexual reproduction. I'm trying to erase that. I can't erase it. This is for sexual reproduction. And then mitosis is how everything else pretty much works, like your skin cells and things like that. It's making a clone. So some more on reproduction. Remember, sexual reproduction, probably don't need to remind you guys this, but that it requires 2 parents, whereas asexual reproduction just requires 1 parent. Oops. Okay, just requires 1 parent. Asexual, 1 parent, and that is done through mitosis, and that's creating clones of yourself. Sexual reproduction are done with 2 parents. You've got somebody, you have a male, or a female that provides the egg and a male that provides the sperm, and you get an organism that looks different from your parents. All right, so now we're moving on to E, energy use. So we did H, homeostasis. Let me just review really quickly. So far we have done H for homeostasis, We've done O. All organisms have to have organization or levels of organization. We've done G, growth and development. All organisms must grow and develop. And we did the first R, which was reproduction. All organisms must reproduce, either through binary fission, cloning themselves, or sexual reproduction. So now we're getting to our E for Hogrecr. E is for energy use or metabolism. All organisms, in order to be considered living, have energy that fuels the action within every cell. The energy is carried out by the mitochondria and the chloroplast. Mitochondria if you're an animal, both mitochondria and chloroplast if you're a plant. Or if you're bacteria. Bacteria just have mitochondria. The rate at which energy is used is called metabolism. Enzymes control the rate of energy that we use. So all important words to know right there. This is kind of a crazy subway path picture that shows all of the different ways in which you can have energy within a cell. No, you do not need to know this, but when we're done with this year, you'll actually be able to understand some of this. We'll look at what carbon fixation is a little bit. We will look at photosynthesis and cellular respiration, obviously. We will look at, we won't really look at those 2 things, but anyways, you'll be able to make sense of some of this craziness in a few months. But this is just to show you how complex energy is for organisms, okay? This shows like a metabolic metro map, all the different ways that an organism can get energy in their cells. So it's very, very complex, very fascinating. More on energy. So we already talked about this, but specialized organisms or organelles are called chloroplasts trap energy. So organelles, they're like tiny little organs within a cell. So an organelle is an organ in a cell. And you guys you probably remember a lot of this from 7th grade life science. You know, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and chloroplasts are only found in plants, things like that. But these are specialized organisms that help our cells create energy. You can imagine that muscle cells that use lots and lots of energy for us as humans, or any animals, they have a ton of mitochondria. And we don't have any chloroplasts because we don't synthesize, or we don't use photosynthesis, but you know, plants have lots of those. So mitochondria, they help release energy. They create energy stored in chemical bonds. All living organisms have to at least have a mitochondria. All right, we are almost done. C stands for cells, and I already kind of talked about this. In order to be considered living, you have to have a cell, even if that's just one cell. An example would be a bacterium. They are just one cell, okay? Or a prokaryotic cell is another word for a bacteria. This is a prokaryotic cell. This is a bacteria cell right here. This over here is a plant cell or a eukaryotic cell. So eukaryotic cells are a little bit more complex, and examples would be fungi, plant, and animal. So you are eukaryotic, so plant and animal, okay, or bacteria. So even if you're just one teeny tiny little bacteria, you're considered living. If you are a plant cell and you've got 1,000 of these type of cells, you're considered living. So we're going to go through 3 steps of the cell theory. Number 1, all organisms are composed of 1 or more cells. So this little dog is composed of probably over 1 million cells. He's considered living. All organisms are composed by 1 or more cells. Or our little bacterium that had its little flagella all over the place, okay? They're teeny, teeny, tiny. They're also, so 1 cell, also considered living. Number 2 for the cell theory, a cell is the basic unit of structure and function in an organism. It's the basic unit of life. So the cell is the basic unit of life. Basically, there isn't anything smaller. There's nothing smaller than a cell that can be considered living. And then all cells come from pre-existing cells. All cells come from pre-existing cells. That basically means reproduction. Okay, cell doesn't just come out of nowhere. It came from a cell before it. Okay, so perhaps this one split into 2 and created these 2. So this would be the parent, and these would be the daughter cells. All right, second to last one, our second R, is respond to stimulus. Anything that causes something else to happen is called a stimulus. And when you react to it, oh, I'm sorry, this is the last one. This is the last one. I said it was the second to last one. This is the last one. This is the last characteristic of life. So anything that causes something else to happen is called stimulus. So example, you feel thirsty, that's a stimulus. And that's also an example of our sorry guys, of homeostasis. So the reaction to that, so you feel thirsty, the reaction to that would be you get something to drink. The reaction to that is a response, okay? Another example could be you're mad. That's the stimulus. Or maybe like somebody hit you, so you get mad. So your response could be you yell. Hopefully you don't do anything more drastic than that. And then I'm going to end right here on this plant. This plant is considered living. It has all of the characteristics of life, and it even responds to stimulus. Not all plants react this quickly to a stimulus, but there are some ferns that do this, where you actually, you can touch it and it will move. So plants, even if they move really slowly or they respond to a stimulus in a different way than what we're used to seeing, they're still considered living. So in order for something to be considered living, they have to have H, homeostasis. They have to have O, they have to have levels of organization. They have to have G, growth and development. They have to have the first R, which was reproduction. They have to have E, energy. Energy. They have to be made of cells. And the last one, they have to be able to respond to a stimulus.